Welcome to Todd's World, everyone. Beers with Jesus. We are excited to be back. Carrie's with me.
We are so excited.
We are.
We're feeling very Christmassy.
We are feeling a little Christmassy. We decided we've been in Mark
hmm
for it seems like forever. I think
We're
40,
loving it. We're
40
loving it.
weeks.
But it's been a
Yeah.
while.
No, we love Mark. But the
40
problem
days and
is
40 nights. Yeah.
that we started to realize if we just stick on this Mark trajectory, that we're going to do the entire holiday season with the crucifixion and the Passion Week. And we thought maybe people weren't feeling that, like with their eggnog. So
Right? Yeah.
so we thought, and because does not, Mark doesn't really deal with the birth of Jesus at all. Mark's like it's the shortest gospel,
Right.
and
He skipped that
the
whole
most to the
chapter.
point, and it starts with John the Baptist, just with John the Baptist ministry, basically.
hmm
That's kind of where we started in Mark. He's baptizing people and the whole thing, and then Jesus gets baptized, starts his ministry. But all of the Christmas stuff, most of that's in Luke, maybe some in Matthew. And so
hmm
we decided to do the first two chapters of Luke over the holidays.
Such a great idea.
And I think that'll be fun. I
I
think I
think
think
so.
people will enjoy that. So we're going to take a pause on Mark
Yep.
14. We'll come back to that after the first of the year. And today we're going to do the first part of Luke 1.
All right.
And then we'll get that's going to be John the Baptist. Then we're going to get to Mary being told, that she's a virgin, but she's going to conceive and all that by an
The
angel, and that's all
miracle. The
cool.
miracle.
And then we get to the actual like manger scene and the whole thing. It's going to be good. It's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
It's good.
So I think it makes sense. I think it works.
Do you
So
have do you have any Christmas decorations up yet?
that's a good question. Maybe you would think I would know that. I'm not
I would think
entirely
you'd know.
sure. Maybe
What do you
not.
mean?
Well, we've been remodeling, and we've been
Right.
in a
Oh,
really
yeah.
big remodel, repainting the whole place, doing little
Okay.
like, additions and whatever.
Everything moved around.
And it's just, yeah, it's a little bit of a cluster around
Displaced.
here. So
So you've just been
I
living in
think
the
there may be a
podcast
few
studio.
Christmas things around, but not a lot yet. We haven't got our tree yet. We were talking about doing that. We need to go do that
Got it.
because I've heard this is what Amber told my sister
Okay.
told me, and
Yes.
our audience might be interested in this.
Okay.
That there's something of a we always get real trees, and
hmm
that there's something of a real Christmas tree shortage this year, and that prices have shot up. I don't know if you've heard
Mm.
about this. I don't know if it has
Mm-mm.
something to do with Hurricane Helene, like if
Oh, shoot.
maybe in that part of North Carolina, the mountains and stuff there that got hit so hard
Yeah.
in Tennessee that there was a lot of tree farms, maybe.
Oh, that's too
I'm
bad.
not positive because we didn't get into it, but she told me that prices have gone up and anyway, the whole thing. So
Darn.
we'll go we
I
need to
hope
go
you
get one.
find I hope you find a good deal.
Yeah, we'll
Our
be
tree is
ready.
up.
Is yours a fake tree?
It is.
Yeah, fake trees.
Yeah, sorry.
I know
It's
I have something
Florida.
about I know I don't blame you. I just have something about real
It's
trees. I can't get by it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love the idea of a real tree. We had a real tree for a long time. It's
Probably be
hard to
different in Florida because also you're not like it's not like cold, you know what I mean? And
right.
they probably
It's
don't
really
last quite
hard.
as
They don't
long.
last very long. It's hard. And I know there are
Yeah.
people who work really hard to keep their tree going. I know people who get real. So I live near two spots where they sell like really close by. I drive by every day. Two lots where they're selling Christmas trees.
Is it
And
like those old school lots like where they got the lights hung up and they've got the trees
totally,
spot?
yeah,
That's cool. I like that.
totally. Oh
It's
yeah, it's
fun.
great. And we saw them setting up the tents and stuff,
Yeah.
It was all very like, oh, here they come. Anyway, they look fully stocked,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I haven't heard
Maybe just the
anything.
prices went up some. I don't know. Maybe that's what it was.
Yikes. Mm,
I really don't know.
yeah.
But all I know is that at Thanksgiving, I was talking to Amber about
hmm
it. She was telling me, and then, so they went and got theirs this past weekend, and I was thinking, oh, we got to do that. So
Right.
we
It'll be
haven't
fun.
yet, but
You'll get the
we
whole
will.
family to go.
We were busy because Lauren had two back-to-back shows, Friday and Saturday.
Oh,
So
busy
we went
weekend.
Thanksgiving
hmm
and then Friday gig, Saturday gig, and there's 6 to 9
hmm
gigs. And I try to get there a little early if I can and help her like set up and whatever. Or I definitely am there to take down if I'm not there
You're
to help
her
her set up.
roadie. I love it.
Not as much.
Dad,
Ronnie's more of a roadie than
dad
I am.
roadie.
Like Ronnie will take her and stuff and
hmm
ride with her and help her get set up. And
That's great.
So
Wow.
I always help her take down and haul everything out and whatever. So it's fun.
Cool.
I don't know. It's
We
weird.
were
We go to like every show. Like Daryl, I was telling you about Daryl in the last,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
the old guy that she sings with. He'd probably be mad when he hears me say the old guy,
The
the
old,
old
he's
man.
not old, is he?
I mean, he's 70 probably anyway.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. He's
He's
no spring
older.
chicken.
He's older. He's not old. Okay.
I actually think he
S-
told me how old he was, and I can't remember what he said. But I
Okay.
know it was all a 70, I believe.
Okay.
Might have been 69, but I think it was 70. Um, Probably over 70. Who knows? But what was I saying about Daryl?
You were talking to him.
Oh
You were
yeah.
talking about Christmas
Oh,
and
he asked me, he said, do you guys go to all of every one of Lauren's shows? And I was like, yeah, we go to every. He's like, holy cow, how do you have time for that? I
I
said,
can't imagine not going. Like,
yeah, I know. That's the thing. It's not like she has four a week.
right.
So
But if she has two on a weekend, like you're going.
yeah, we go. What else are you gonna do?
Totally.
What I have
Exactly. I
found is
can't
that
imagine.
we don't go out other than that a lot anymore. Like
Right.
we used to more.
Yeah, it
But
kind of
but
uses up your
but
going out
yeah,
time.
Nikki and I aren't as likely to like go out and go to the bar and get drinks or whatever because
Right.
we do that with Lauren shows and we're there for
Right.
for 3 or 4 hours. So
That makes
it
sense.
has shifted that a little. But
That
other
makes
than
sense.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good.
It's
So
cool though. I'm glad you go.
it's fun.
So,
I wouldn't miss it. I enjoy it. I really do. It's a good time.
absolutely.
So, and you know what? Someday when she's big, she'll be all over. I won't be able to go to them all, and I understand that.
I
So
know,
while I
right?
can, I enjoy it.
Well, maybe if she's like a massive star on tour, you're just going to be
I'm not gonna
backstage
fly
and
all over all the time. I can't be
I don't
doing
know.
that. I
She's
got a
got her own,
life.
she has her own
I
like
got to do beers with cheese. I got people who depend on me. Our audience
used,
depends on
well,
us.
what if she has a used jet she bought from Taylor Swift when Taylor
Yeah,
Swift
there you go.
upgraded and she's jetting about? You could do your
Taylor Swift got caught up in the Diddy prosecution, so she's gone.
I just don't think she's into that kind
I
of
have
stuff.
absolutely no idea.
Yeah, no.
So
I
all
think
I
she's
know is that a lot of big name people, I believe, are.
yeah. You know what
Whether or
Taylor
not,
Swift though, Todd? Taylor Swift is she is a machine. That woman is writing. When she's not performing, she's writing and recording. I mean, in the middle of this Eras tour, can I just tell you,
mhm.
in the middle of this Eras tour, she released a surprise double album
Wow,
in the middle of it.
she does write a lot.
It
She's a
has like
prolific writer.
yeah, it has like 50 plus, maybe 60 plus. It's
Maybe
ridiculous.
maybe questionable how good of a writer she is all the time, or how much they sound the same. But she's a very prolific
Oh,
writer,
they're
and I do like
so
her.
good.
I think she's really talented.
Yeah, she's
You'd be
talented.
shocked on X how many times I see people say
Uh-huh.
Taylor Swift is a man. I mean, you'd be
What?
shocked. I see it frequently. I'm not
They're
saying I think
just
that. I
they're
don't.
just
I
haters.
see
They're
it a lot,
haters.
and it's
It's
something that I
ridiculous.
think I never knew until I started seeing it all the
Yeah.
time.
I think they must say that because she's tall. I don't know. Whatever. But she's
I don't
just
know why.
my point
Why's
is,
everybody got? Why all chicks got to be a dude nowadays? I don't
I don't
know.
know. But here's my point. She's far too busy creating, and there's evidence of it every single
Oh,
day.
to be around Diddy.
Yeah, she's not into that. She doesn't have time for that. She's got to get to sleep. She's got another show tomorrow. You know
Well,
what I mean?
Let's
She's
hope.
yeah.
Let's hope that Taylor Swift is on the.
Yeah.
You know what? Before we get started, and
Okay.
I've got to throw this in because this is
Okay.
the craziest thing.
You
And
get everything on Beers with Jesus, so
by next week, this will be null and void.
oh no. Okay.
So a little bit of wildly opinionated news hour is going to squeak in here, guys. We did
Uh-oh.
that last night, but I hadn't seen all this yet.
Okay.
We mentioned at the end about all the UFO talk, right?
Yes.
At the end of Beers with Jesus, we talked about that. Well, I was catching, and I saw this in multiple sources. There's this guy out there, I can't remember. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's known to people, and he has like a known website stuff.
Okay.
He's known. He has some algorithm. I don't know what he uses, and he makes
Okay.
some predictions sometimes. Like he predicted the tsunami in India. Is that where it was?
Okay.
That big
Okay.
huge tsunami. I think it was India.
All right.
Um, he predicted 9/11. Like some multiple like big huge things he predicted.
He's like a
Okay.
modern day Nostradamus.
Something like that. And I
Okay.
wish I could remember the guy's name. I do have a clip because I was going to play it in news, but then I realized
Yeah.
that he made a prediction. He made this prediction. It was either in '07 or '09.
Okay.
Can't remember which. 2009 maybe. Anyway, while
Okay.
ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And his prediction was that we are going to have a battle between humans and UFOs, and it will be. And no, he said this back in. It was either '09 or
Oh
'07. But wait
boy.
till you hear what
Okay.
he said. It was going to be 39 days after Donald Trump was interviewed by Joe Rogan. He said this in 2009.
What? So this he has like
So it's
visions or something.
December 3rd. It's tomorrow that we should be having this war between UFOs and humans.
Oh, I'm not prepared. Are you prepared?
I'm not prepared at all. I did buy an extra 12 pack of beer. I don't know if that's going to help
I'm not
anything.
prepared.
I
Well,
thought maybe I could watch out in the sky.
I have my eggnog and new bottle of Four Roses bourbon.
Isn't that the craziest thing you ever heard?
That's the craziest thing I ever heard.
Like, who would have thought? I mean, 2009, why are you putting Joe Rogan and Donald Trump together? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Hey, you know what, Todd? You're gonna have to drop this really early. You're gonna have to drop this Beers with Jesus early
I know. Well, it might be over
because
by then because tomorrow's the 3rd
well,
and
I'm
we're
just
dropping
saying.
news tomorrow.
Maybe I know, but maybe people will be listening to
We'll have to do a
this,
double drop.
do a double
It'll
and
be our
say,
last. Guys, if this is our last show, it's been a pleasure.
I know, peace be with you all in the last battle. And
You see why I felt like I had to bring that up? Like, it's
I
very time sensitive.
I am only armed with my Bible and the eggnog.
That might be all you need. That
I
might
think
be
that's all.
as effective as at aliens as anything.
I think that's all I need. Yeah.
But supposedly some UFOs might be fighting some UFOs too. I don't know. There's like different forces
What
out there,
on
different
earth?
sides. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that's what I learned.
Wow.
How about that? We didn't fit it into news. I didn't know about the Joe Rogan Trump 39-day thing
That's so
last night.
crazy. And that it, yeah, that it was on
But
the
I mean, I saw it
3rd.
in multiple sources today. Like this is a
Wow.
known thing. It's known that this guy made this prediction.
I can't believe I was gonna say I can't believe this isn't like getting some weird countdown like the Mayan
Well, I
calendar, like
think it is with some,
Y2K or
in some circles. I
in
think
some
it
circles.
is.
You know, I'm glad to know that I'm not in the craziest of circles because my family thinks I'm in a crazy circle.
Wait till you tell them about that. Wait
Guys,
till
you'll
you tell them
never
enjoy the
believe.
night.
Sleep tight.
I don't know if you
Where's
need to go to
what's the
work
time
tomorrow. We'll see what
zone?
happens.
What's right? What's the time zone, Todd? Like, where is this
Who knows?
starting?
I don't know. But I
Where's
will
this
say
guy
I've seen
located?
so much UFO
That's
activity. And I mean
insane.
videos like, you know, crazy. Just, I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
And I suspect, you know what I suspect? I'm bringing this up. I'm going to bring this back around to Beers
Okay.
with Jesus to the Bible, which is
Okay.
I don't actually believe in extraterrestrials.
Ah. Okay.
I may believe in other terrestrials, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe in extraterrestrials. I don't believe they're coming from outer space or in any planet or anything else. They've got the Navy has footage of these UFOs dropping into the ocean and coming out of the ocean. It makes more sense to me they'd be coming out of there than anywhere. But
Okay.
regardless of that, I suspect that whatever truth there is to them,
Mm-hmm.
that it is something spiritual oriented,
Interesting.
demonic, maybe. I don't know. I
I
don't know what
hope
you'd call
not.
it. When I say that, what I think is that when you get these, that maybe you get periods in human history where they're like major turning points or major conflicts or whatever, where I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the enemy, the devil, whatever you want to call him,
Yeah.
that sometimes pulls out all the stops and just
Okay.
pulls back the curtain and goes full board to distract people and do whatever he can. You know what I mean?
Could be. I mean, I
So
can
if
imagine him
something
doing it
like
right
that
now.
were to happen, that would be what I would that would be how I would be looking for an explanation of it. I don't think it's people from Mars.
Maybe that's why all these fights were happening on football fields this weekend.
I know.
Maybe. So, okay. So, Latin, I looked it up to make sure that I'm not
Crazy.
stupid, crazy, in the crazy
Well, we know
circle.
you're not stupid.
But the Latin word extra means outside or beyond.
Beyond Earth, yeah.
Yeah. So, when we say extra, I mean,
I don't
you're
believe they're
not,
interplanetary.
Okay, yeah, you don't feel like it's beings from another planet.
No, I've dabbled a little in some flat Earth stuff that makes me think there might be other realms beyond the ice wall, but beyond that, I would still consider that terrestrial. Although it might not be Earth technically, I guess.
Right. I was gonna say, and when we say extraterrestrial, we mean our terrestrial, right? Like
Right. So that,
our Earth,
yeah.
our
I
planet.
don't
But
believe that any of this stuff's going on in outer space. That all seems crazy to me. But
okay.
that's all.
Well, wait, where do you think they live?
Well,
As
I think there's a
beings
possibility
or
that they're in the oceans,
okay.
that they would be a remnant of an ancient, very technologically advanced
Okay.
civilization created by God. I don't think there's anything that wasn't created by God,
Of
but
course.
I don't think there's any reason to think that we're the first go round necessarily.
You think it's where we get the concept of Atlantis
I
kind of a
think
thing? Like
possibly,
maybe
and
there's something.
yeah, and
I don't feel like
when you
that's
look
as
in the
crazy as it
early
sounds.
chapters of Genesis,
Hmm.
they talk about how the sons of God came down and had sex with or they desired and mated with whatever the daughters of men, and that's where the giants of old came from. They call them the Nephilim. It's like Genesis 5 maybe pre-flood we're talking,
I feel like the Catholics glossed over this.
and I suspect that there could be
Interesting.
some there's a few references in early parts of Genesis. I feel about the early part of Genesis like I do about Revelation, which is I think it's
Hmm.
um mostly symbolic, kind of poetry-ish. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I feel like once you hit Abraham and
Creative writing.
Genesis that you're dealing with kind of human history, and you're dealing with a pretty historical thing all the way through.
Okay.
But then I think once so it's bookended, I feel like, by stuff that's either it's not historical, it's not factual in that way that we think of life. I'm not saying that God didn't create,
I
but that
understand.
it's not like the first few chapters of Genesis aren't set up like a science book. That's not what they're for.
Yeah, I
You
was gonna
understand
say
what I'm saying?
it's
They're like
kind of
introducing the
imaginative.
mythology. I say mythology, but
Hmm.
sometimes myths are even more true than facts, really. I mean, if you think of like these stories that like undergird everything, like a hero's
Yeah.
arc, and we see it repeated over and over. You
Yeah,
know what
like
I mean?
like the themes of it. Sure.
Like
Okay.
Jesus would be the ultimate hero arc.
True.
Jordan Peterson says that he's like it's the worst possible thing happening to the best possible person,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
he's the ultimate of that, which
Okay.
makes sense. I mean, I think the Bible that to me that works with the Bible. There could be some literalists out there that get real hung up on
Ooh.
it, but
And if you study like that kind of concept of a hero's journey, you
mhm,
think about Jesus's like trip, like his trip to hell
right.
and back. That's really interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah,
Man,
it
why didn't
makes
we
a lot
like,
of sense.
yeah, why didn't we put the hero's journey into the Jesus story in school?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
That's cool.
So I see I did bring it back,
Wow.
but
I have
we'll see what
questions.
happens tomorrow. Who knows?
I know. Wow.
By the time you all listen to this, hell, it might be over.
I'm telling you, I think you need to do a double
I
drop
need to
tomorrow.
drop early.
All right.
Okay,
So
so we're going
we're
to start
gonna,
in Luke 1.
okay.
You want to read? Or you want me to read?
I can read
Through
some
25 is what I'm
through tw
thinking.
so
So
I don't have the numbers. Do you want to read like
do you have the heading that says
child
Virgin
childless
conceives?
like
Right
up to that
up
point?
to that, yeah. I figure that we'll do the Virgin conceives and the Mary thing, which will finish out
Okay.
chapter 1 next week. And then we'll have chapter 2 maybe in a couple parts. Well, we got the birth of John too. We'll see how we do next week. But anyway, I feel
Okay.
like a childless couple conceives is kind of where we're gonna go today, if that
Okay.
works for you.
That sounds good. My eggnog is starting to hit me, but I will do my
I can
do
read it if you're
I'll do
getting a
my
little
best.
too hammered, Carrie.
We'll see. We'll see how I do. I'm just
Lots
thinking
of
about
beers with Jesus.
I'm thinking about aliens fighting us tomorrow. It's a little crazy to think about. Okay.
Well, at least I distracted you. That's the whole point.
Right? That it distracts you. You want me to read this part before that, though,
Yeah.
correct? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Start at the beginning and go all the way to that a virgin conceives heading.
Okay, got it.
And that should be good, right?
Yes. The layout, I just wanted to
I just want to
confirm.
point out, people, that you can't get this kind of content anywhere else. As
That is so
many as
true.
many
It's
hundreds
so
of thousands
true.
of podcasts as there are out there, you don't get this anywhere else.
This is true. He said humbly.
Well, for good or bad, I don't
For
know.
good
I'm
or
just saying
bad.
you
I
don't get it anywhere
know.
else. It's at
I
least
don't mind it.
authentic and unique,
I know. I don't mind it.
wildly
Okay.
entertaining.
It's true. At least we think so. Here we go.
Okay.
All right, Luke chapter 1. So many others have tried their hand at putting together a story of the wonderful harvest of scripture and history that took place among us, using reports handed down by the original eyewitnesses who served this word with their very lives. Since I have investigated all the reports in close detail, starting from the story's beginning, I decided to write it all out for you, most honorable Theophilus. Is that how you would say that? So you can know beyond the shadow of a doubt the reliability of what you were taught. During the rule of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest assigned service in the regiment of Abijah.
Abijah. I don't know.
Abijah? Okay.
Who knows?
His name was Zechariah. His wife was descended from the daughters of Aaron. Her name was Elizabeth. Together they lived honorably before God, careful in keeping to the ways of the commandments, and enjoying a clear conscience before God. But they were childless because Elizabeth could never conceive, and now they were quite old. It so happened that as Zechariah was carrying out his priestly duties before God, working the shift assigned to his regiment, it came to him one turn in life to enter the sanctuary of God and burn incense. The congregation was gathered and praying outside the temple at the hour of the incense offering. Unannounced, an angel of God appeared just to the right of the altar of incense. Zechariah was paralyzed in fear. But the angel reassured him. Don't fear, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth, your wife, will bear a son by you. You are to name him John. You're going to leap like a gazelle for joy. And not only you, many will delight in his birth. He'll achieve great stature with God. He'll drink neither wine nor beer. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit from the moment he leaves his mother's womb. He will turn many sons and daughters of Israel back to their God. He will herald the hearts of parents to children and kindle devout understanding among hardened skeptics. He'll get the people ready for God. I love that line.
It's really good.
Zechariah said to the angel, Do you expect me to believe this? I'm an old man, and my wife is an old woman. But the angel said, I am Gabriel, the sentinel of God, sent especially to bring you this glad news. But because you won't believe me, you'll be unable to say a word until the day of your son's birth. Every word I've spoken to you will come true on time, God's time. Mean- Meanwhile, the congregation waiting for Zechariah was getting restless, wondering what was keeping him so long in the sanctuary. When he came out and couldn't speak, they knew he had seen a vision. He continued speechless and had to use sign language with the people. When the course of his priestly assignment was completed, he went back home. It wasn't long before his wife Elizabeth conceived. She went off by herself for 5 months, relishing her pregnancy. So, this is how God acts to remedy my unfortunate condition, she said.
Wow. A lot going on.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
You missed one line. I'm going to read it for
Did
you.
did I?
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
okay.
Okay.
He will herald God's arrival in the style and strength of
Oh,
Elijah. Soften the
gotcha.
hearts of parents to
Okay.
children and kindle devout understanding among hardened skeptics. He'll get the people ready for God.
Gotcha.
It's important only because um
Oh yeah, he was
in
saying all
Mal
the things John would do.
yeah, and in Malachi God there was a prophecy
Mm-hmm.
that when the great and terrible day of the Lord came, that he would send Elijah first.
Mm-hmm.
Um Later on in the Gospels, that he and the great and terrible day of the Lord is the destruction of Jerusalem, like we talked about with Mark
Mm-hmm.
13. And the disciples asked him, and I don't think it's in Mark. I'm not sure which gospel it's in, but they
Okay.
said, but wasn't Elijah supposed to come first? And he said, Elijah did come. You just didn't know him when he came, and it was John the
Oh,
Baptist
okay.
because so a little bit important, but
So he says God's arrival. He will herald God's arrival in the style and strength of Elijah.
yeah, they were probably both Nazarites. Nazarites were a certain vow that in the Bible, you
Hmm.
could people could take a Nazarite vow, and there was basically three things that went along with that. If you took a Nazarite vow, you could do it for a period of time. So you could say, "I'm going to be a Nazarite for 6 months," or "I'm going to be a Nazarite for a year." Or there was a
Okay.
few people that God designated as Nazarites at their birth or
Okay.
before their birth. But the three things that they didn't do, they didn't drink wine or anything to do with they didn't drink wine, strong drink, or anything to do with the grapevine. Like they didn't eat raisins, they didn't eat grapes, any of it.
Okay.
It wasn't just wine. They didn't cut their hair,
Okay.
and there's something else I'm forgetting. What is it? I just forgot what it was. I had it anyway. There's something else,
Okay.
but
Did they not marry or anything like that?
you
Let me
know,
just see.
no, they did.
Okay.
Because Samson, you remember Samson
I was going to ask
in the
if
Bible?
Sam.
He was a Nazarite from birth.
Okay.
Now, he didn't pay much attention to a lot of those things.
Right.
He kind of did what he wanted. But there was a
Oh, the third thing is they avoided all contact with
dead
graves or
bodies. Yes, that's what
corpses.
it was.
Yes.
As soon as you
Okay.
said that, I remembered that. So
Yep.
that was one of the things Samson didn't do. Remember, there was the carcass of a lion, and he got honey out of it, and then he made it, and then he had a riddle about it
Oh,
with the Philistines, and
okay.
then he like killed a bunch of them and took all their clothes. Anyway, there's some great stories in the Old Testament. There really is. That's in Judges. But Samson didn't. He did that, and he um, eventually Delilah cut his hair, and he lost his strength.
Right.
And he didn't.
Mm.
But we can assume he drank. It doesn't say he did, but he did about everything else. So he didn't pay a whole lot of attention to things. Elijah was probably another. Samuel was a Nazarite. Elijah was probably one, even though it's not super clear.
Okay.
There's it's suspected that Elijah was probably a Nazarite. Now John the Baptist is here too.
Okay.
And it's kind of an Old Testament thing. It didn't really carry over into the New Covenant,
Hmm.
but John the Baptist, and this is who this is about. So this is about John the Baptist's parents. This is still Old Covenant. This, even though it's in the New
Hmm.
Testament, it's still like he's like the last Old Testament prophet,
Hmm.
basically. So
Like the style.
yeah,
Yeah.
and and a great one. I mean, I think Jesus said, I think we saw that after he died, remember he died in prison,
Yes.
and that Jesus said that there hadn't been another prophet born like him, or whatever he said. It was something like that, but very,
Hmm.
very, very high praise. And it's also interesting because Jesus wasn't a Nazarite,
Right.
not at all. I mean, in fact, Jesus made the comment to the Pharisees that John came to you neither eating or drinking, and I came to you both feasting and drinking. And he claimed he had, and you claim I have a devil, and you claimed he was bad, and it didn't matter what God said to him; they weren't happy with it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Hmm.
So it's um it's interesting. But so this is the story. Starts. Luke was a companion of Paul. Luke was not an apostle, so he
Okay.
wasn't one of the
Right.
apostles. He wasn't a disciple. He didn't have any kind of. I don't think that Luke knew Jesus. I think you get the impression
Really?
that he did a ton of interviews with a lot of people.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure Luke didn't know. When I say know him, I mean personally,
Hmm.
when he was alive on Earth. I'm nearly certain of that.
Okay.
Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and then he wrote Acts. And he was a
Oh,
companion
yeah.
of Paul. And he's writing this to Theophilus. And that's why last week, or not last week, but when we talked about the end time stuff,
Hmm.
we went back to Luke because he's writing to the Greeks. And so
Okay.
the Mark and Matthew both had kind of a more Jewish audience that would understand what the abomination of desolation meant. For Luke, he just said when Jerusalem's surrounded by armies, because he's writing to Greeks. They don't know they don't have the background in it,
Okay.
which is kind of
Hmm.
nice about Luke. because
Right.
he's right to people like us, you know. We're not a bunch of
Hmm.
Jews that have everything figured out. And so it's interesting, but one of the, I believe, historically they believe that one of the primary sources for Luke's gospel was Mary.
Mm.
So that might
Jesus's mother, Mary.
Jesus' mother Mary, yeah.
Okay.
One that's in your lawn. No, just kidding.
Todd loves to say that I have Mary on my lawn.
I just thought all Catholics did. I thought that was part of the deal.
No, we do not.
Like the
I
little
don't have a
arch
problem.
over,
I don't have a problem with anyone who does, but no, we don't have one.
clothes all faded out from the
Oh my
sun.
gosh. So, so that's interesting. I
And that's
wonder.
probably why we get some of this. So we get the best picture of Jesus' birth and like of
Hmm.
Mary and Gabriel and the announcement and all that stuff. The best of it is in Luke, like the most details.
Well, do you think that he got a lot of this information from her?
Yeah, that's what I think. I
That's
believe
pretty
that
cool.
Mary was one of a because he talks about how so many others have tried their hand at putting together a story of the wonderful harvest of scripture and history that took place among us. So he's using reports handed down by the original eyewitnesses who served the word with their very lives. And Mary, I know historically in church history was very heavily involved in the first church. She was, you know, as Mother Jesus, his brothers were too. James, his
Hmm.
brother Jesus, wrote
Right.
the book of James.
Hmm.
So, and that was probably later for James. It wasn't the same James as Peter, James, and John. Those were two. James was the brother of John. So there's a couple different. It gets a little bit confusing because you know they got some different. Um, but Jesus' brother James became
Hmm.
one of the preeminent uh, leaders of the early church.
Okay.
Like in Acts, Luke talks about how Paul and Peter kind of got in this disagreement about circumcision and the law and what the Gentile believers should have to do and what they shouldn't have to do. And the person who made the final call on that was James the Just, who was James the brother of Jesus.
Oh, okay.
But as you read the Gospels, his brothers weren't real into it. So I don't think my guess is that was post resurrection when it kind of all came together for them. I don't think that his brothers necessarily were followers of Jesus during his ministry. We don't get that impression. The generally when we see his brothers and things, they're not terribly happy with him in the Gospels. There's not a lot of it,
Hmm.
but there's they're trying to get him to like, why are you trying to do this and why you know what I mean? Making a spectacle of
Well,
himself.
and it's funny because you know what? You would speak that way if it were a sibling.
Yeah,
Like a real, you know what I mean? That makes sense.
and I think that Jesus that the accusation or or whatever you would call it that he
The
was
allegation.
the allegation that he was something of a bastard followed Jesus around through his life, that he was illegitimate through birth.
Who?
Jesus.
Oh.
Because I mean Mary had it. You know what I mean? That the circumstances of his birth, I think
Hmm.
there's a few places in the gospels where you
Oh.
get that impression.
Oh, that I'm sorry, that stigma.
Yeah, that stigma, I think
Okay.
it stuck with Jesus, and my guess is it stuck with Mary, and that probably had impacts on the family.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
I hadn't thought of that, but that's interesting.
Because remember, it talks in a little bit. We'll see. Well, in a few weeks, we'll see that
Hmm.
Joseph was going to put Mary. He's going to try to put her away privately. He was going to try,
Right.
because he found out she was pregnant,
Hmm.
and then an angel appears to him in a dream
Hmm.
and says, "No, this is of God. She was a virgin." And
Right. I
so,
mean, but like, offering that explanation to anyone who's
right,
judging
most of
you,
the yeah, you think
not going
Nazareth
to go
bought
over
that?
well.
I think that's part of why when
Shoot.
Jesus goes back to his hometown, which we saw in Mark, he's not received. He couldn't do really anything in his hometown. And I think they
Hmm.
thought, who is this? The carpenter's son? He's not even legitimate. You know what I
Right.
mean? And my guess
Sure.
is he got a little bit of that from his siblings too.
Maybe.
It'd be hard not to.
Well, and I was going to say, obviously it wasn't taught in the home, but they may have heard, if it was like a rumor in town or
Yeah.
something, they would have picked up on it at some point.
Plus, he had to be a little different. I mean, I don't think that. I don't personally buy into the idea that, there's some traditions, they're probably Catholic because these kinds of things would tend to be,
Okay.
that Jesus would like when he was a kid was turning clay pigeons into real pigeons and stuff. Um,
Yeah, where
am
did
I
that come
right about
from?
that?
Where'd that come from?
I'm pretty sure it's just Catholic tradition. I don't think there's anything. Um,
Because I have heard that, but I don't know
yeah,
where that came from.
well, I'm sure there's an answer to it, and I'm sure that
Okay.
and I say Catholic tradition 'cause they're the oldest. I mean, most of the traditions
Sure.
come from them. That's what
Hmm.
and so, um, I don't personally believe that that was going on. I think that Jesus, when he was baptized and then the Holy Spirit came upon him, in my opinion, that's the beginning of his ministry. I understand he didn't sin before that, but I don't
Hmm.
think he was wandering around just like killing fig trees and stuff when he was like 10. I mean, maybe, what do I know? But,
Your point is you think he was pretty normal,
well, somewhat
or you
normal, but I
think he
still think he
wasn't.
was different. You know what I mean?
I mean, he had
I
to.
think he was different without them being able to pinpoint. My guess is, and also my guess would be that there was that Mary probably had, it would seem, given
Hmm.
everything that happened, that there would be, not that he would be her favorite, but there'd be like a specialness in that bond. Do you know what I mean? That if you're a sibling, you might have a hard time with.
Right.
That
I
makes
mean,
sense.
sure. I'm just laughing at the idea of him
I
being
mean,
her
she
favorite.
an
I
angel
mean,
shows up, and
yeah,
that kind of
he
stuff doesn't go
he's
away,
he's the son of God, so
right?
it's kind of like it's kind of tough to compete with.
But that's probably a tough sell for his siblings. You know what I mean?
That's
So
funny.
anyway, we've gone far afield.
Okay,
But
sorry.
point is, Luke talked to people. I think that Mary
Hmm.
was one of his primary sources,
Okay.
and he's confident that what we've got here is the truth. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
That this is a reliable witness to what happened with this guy named Jesus.
Hmm.
So, but then it talks about, during the rule of Herod, it talks about, we go right into John the Baptist. So it's not just Jesus' birth
Hmm.
that has these kind of, or even conception, that has these kind of miraculous
Hmm.
qualities around it. It's John who's going to prepare the way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then there's some clear parallels between, um, Zachariah and Elizabeth when they're old, being told that they're going to have a baby, and Abraham and Sarah back in the
Right.
day with the original covenant of God. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's kind of cool from that
That
angle.
is cool.
So this was his one thing. They had tons of priests, and so the priests were on this kind of cyclical schedule because
Hmm.
they really had more priests than they needed. But the entire tribe of Levites, God had set aside to be priests. And so there's more and more and more of them. Well, there was a lottery, and if you won the lottery, you got, for once in your life, and then you were taken out of it after that, you got to go into, not the holy of holies, but kind of in the temple they had set aside places, and the holiest place was where they made the offerings and whatever,
Hmm.
and you would go in and there was a veil and whatever. And this was his one time. He had landed on it.
You're talking about him being in the sanctuary.
Yeah, about Zechariah. So
Okay.
this is his one. So I mean, in a way, career wise, like, he's waited his whole life for this one shot
Hmm.
to go in and offer sacrifices to the presence of God.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Big deal, really big deal.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he goes in and there's an angel standing next to the altar.
Incredible.
And he's like, whoa. And every time angels show up, the first thing they say, they're always like, calm down, don't be afraid. So clearly, fear is the first emotion that any human feels in the presence of an angel, it seems.
Right. I don't know where people get the idea, but there are these artists and like AI artists who have taken descriptions from various places in the Bible of these angels
Hmm.
and they've created these images and they're terrifying. Terrifying,
Some of them,
some of
I'm
them.
sure, are like the
Some,
seraphims and things like that.
right.
all the
But
wings and all the eyes and all the, yeah,
oh, right. Yeah, the eyes one's crazy. But these can look like, according to these sources, can look like, you know, creatures with multiple, like
yeah,
hawks with multiple heads and all this stuff. And I
yeah.
think, but I find it really interesting that they all open with that.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be afraid. So they must be big. I mean, maybe they're fiery. I don't know.
It's not the, what
Well,
was the
this is
old,
Gabriel. This is
yeah,
like
it's the
Gabriel.
main dude.
It's one of the Mac Daddies.
Yeah. It's God's primary messenger.
hmm
Michael would be the archangel. Michael's the
hmm
one that we see fighting with the devil over the body of Moses and things like that and kind of leads the heavenly host. But Gabriel is like in the presence of God in his throne room and is his personal messenger.
Right.
You
Well, I
know what I
think
mean?
he's an archangel also. I think there are like four of
That could
them.
be. That may be. You probably know more than I do.
I think that, but he's another one. So those are those main, yeah,
Yeah.
those main ones are they've got to be really impressive, I
Oh,
guess.
I am quite certain that they
Overwhelming,
are
maybe.
that.
I know. I mean, we just picture like this ethereal,
We
white-winged,
picture that
white
old, what was that old
robe.
show, Touched by an Angel or something with
Right.
that
With
one
Michael
chick in it.
Landon.
I can't remember. No, that was
Oh, wait, what was that?
Touched by an Angel had the chick in it.
Ew. Okay.
Michael Landon was Highway to Heaven.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And that had Mr. Edwards in from Little House on the Prairie with Michael Landon. Remember that? I just watched
Yes,
Nikki and I
I
don't know what
remember
we were
that.
watching. Maybe it was on Prime. I can't remember, but it was something that had old shows and they had Highway to Heaven on it, and we watched a couple of the
That's
episodes.
so cute. It was such a cute show. So Touched by an Angel. What was that?
That had the chick in it.
Chick.
Oh man,
I
she's
need
she's
more details.
quasi famous.
Okay.
Um, and if I could remember, my mom and my sisters watched it all the time.
I
I,
remember the name of it. I
I
remember
did
the
not watch it.
this was like a early 80s maybe?
Yeah, 94 to 2003,
Oh, later. Okay.
and it had there she is. I can't remember her name.
Okay.
Dang it. What is going on? Who's the chick? Rama Downey. Rama Downey. I don't
Hmm.
know. Maybe I
I don't
just
know.
know it because my mom and sisters watched it. I don't know.
That could be.
But
So
it was pretty popular.
so was she all like white
Yeah, she was just
robed,
chill,
white
you know.
wing? Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of
She
glowing.
wasn't telling anybody, don't be afraid.
I was gonna say, I don't think that's what these angels look like. Because if you saw
Clearly
that,
not.
if you saw that, you'd be like, kind of wide-eyed, but like, wow, hi.
Right.
These
This
have
is
got
this
to
is a
be
more yeah, this is a they come in big.
big. They
They
they have to look
make an
they have to
entrance.
look not of this world.
So
So, yeah,
yeah, and it says Zachariah was paralyzed with fear.
right.
And that's fairly typical too, that you see people almost unable to even speak or move or do anything, and
It's really cool.
they have to like calm them down. That same thing
Yeah.
happened with Gideon and the angels. It happened a lot. It
hmm
happened frequently throughout the Bible. When you see angels, they're it's an event for the
That's
person
pretty cool.
involved.
I think that's so cool. Mm.
So
So, okay, so this is his
so the
one
angel,
time.
yeah, this
Gets
is
to go
one
in the
time.
sanctuary and
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Okay.
I mean, God has a sense of timing and story. That's what I know.
Right.
If everything comes down to a story, God does a good job with it. You know what I mean?
True.
He's like the best. So so the angel says to him, "Don't fear." Then he says, "Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth, your wife, will bear a son by you. You're to name him John. You're going to leap like a gazelle for joy. Not only you, but many will delight in his birth. He'll achieve great stature with God." It's interesting that he says your prayer has been heard. Now, it's hard to imagine because it says that they're quite old. It's hard to
hmm
imagine. My guess would be that it's been decades past that they've come to terms with the fact that this isn't going to happen. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. It's probably not a recent prayer that they're
That's what I
asking for
mean. That's what's
children,
kind of
right?
well, it's either that or he's saying your prayer that you just offered. But you know what it made me wonder is it made me wonder if like we talk about how God's timing is all completely and totally different than our timing.
hmm
And God's outside of time, right? Everything is now to
Right.
God.
Everything's now.
We have a hard time like wrapping our heads around it. But so for Zachariah and Elizabeth, this was probably prayers they prayed 40 years earlier. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like this was a big deal. I mean, it was
Hmm.
obviously. And it's funny that now the angel's like, your prayer's been heard. You know what I mean?
He's
Like,
probably like, what prayer are you talking about?
I know. I kind of think like because clearly when the angel tells him he's like, what? It's
He's probably
crazy.
thinking, you mean the prayer about my aching back and arthritis?
Right. And then he says, you're going to have your wife will bear you a son. You'll name him John. And then later on, he says, do you expect me to believe? I mean, Zachariah's response is, this is crazy talk. I
Right.
mean,
It's
you're
pretty funny.
amazing and everything,
Right.
but she's old and I'm really old, and people don't have kids when they're our age. 75-year-olds aren't running around with a stroller.
Right.
It's so
I
much
would think
exact. It's like
I would
Abraham and Sarah.
it is. I would think that Gabriel might be amused if he can be amused. I would think he'd be kind of amused by this. I was a little surprised by his response.
Well, I was listening to Steve Gregg, that Bible teacher I listened to,
Hmm.
and he made the point that it Elijah, or not Elijah, getting mixed up,
That's okay.
Zachariah,
Hmm.
it wasn't necessary him being mute for the duration of her pregnancy,
Hmm.
that may not have necessarily been a punishment like we think of it, because like Sarah and Abraham, they laughed, like they thought the idea was ridiculous when God told
Hmm.
them, and God said, you're going to name him Isaac, which means laughter. And he
Love
said, you
that.
watch, a year later I'm coming back, you're going to have a baby, honey. But he
So
didn't make him
funny.
mute, you know what I mean?
Right.
And even Mary, we're going to see next week, is taken back by the idea. How can this be? I've never been with a
Right.
man.
Hmm.
So and the angel, and there's no, so what he postulated, I don't know if that's the right word, but what he suggested was that it's possible, because oftentimes when angels showed up, and when people were given missions and things like that, there were certain signs that accompanied it. And that this
Okay.
was a sign that God always intended to do, because in that what it kind of represented is, for the last 400 years, this is that kind of between the Old and the New Testament, when you had kind of the era of the Maccabees and whatever, but you had kind of a dead period. They hadn't heard from God in 400 years. There hadn't been a prophet in 400
Wow.
years in Israel. And that what Zechariah's kind of him being mute and not able to speak,
Hmm.
that what that represented was kind of that, and then John's born, and like we're entering a new
Oh,
era, and God's speaking again. Like this is his next prophet. Like it
got
was
it.
kind of a sign of
A
what's
s-
going on.
It was a sign about who John was going to be and what he was going to represent.
Yeah. And that
Interesting.
God's been silent for a long time, but God's moving again. And at first it's
Interesting.
John and then Jesus, and
That
and
was
it is.
someone's interpretation of that, of him being
Yeah. And I thought
muted.
that was I
That's
thought that was good, because that was
that's
something I
pretty
hadn't
cool.
heard before, and it made
Hmm.
sense to me. that
Sure.
maybe that maybe that's what it was. You know what I mean?
You're right.
But
Wow.
yeah, I thought that was kind of cool, because that is God's getting ready, and I mean it's a massive thing. Obviously, it's like all of history comes to this point in Jesus, and everything is turning. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? We're
Yes.
moving from the old covenant to the new covenant, and then the church is he's moving it he's destroying Israel, and he's moving on with spiritual Israel and the church, and then that mountain's going to grow and grow. His kingdom is going to grow until it fills the world. You know what I mean? He's going to
Yeah.
work. Still is
Hmm.
at work right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And and then also the Holy Spirit's going to come. Now it says that the Holy Spirit filled John from the moment of his birth, which
Hmm.
probably is similar to how he did with Samson and with Samuel, and it probably wasn't the same exactly as kind of a Christian type of understanding, because that probably Jesus said once he left, the Comforter would come, and then when you get saved, you're indwelt with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit kind of comes to live in you. But
Hmm.
that's part of the new covenant. That's part of salvation. That's part of, and that didn't happen before. You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's only it's a newer
Yeah.
concept. Holy
But
Spirit.
but with John, who knows? Because he's so close to he's so close to everything.
Okay.
So who knows exactly? But one thing we know is that he was powerful. I mean, Elijah was the prophet who had the priests of Baal all assemble on Mount Carmel. You remember? And they had their two altars. And and basically he said, whoever calls to God and whoever answers,
Hmm.
Israel, you can worship them because they'd been worshiping Baal for a long time. And so for the duration of most of a day, the priests of Baal, they're cutting themselves, they're doing everything, trying to get fire to fall from heaven on their altar,
Okay.
right? And it doesn't matter what they do, nothing
Right.
happens. And Elijah's mocking them the whole time. He's making fun of him. He's like, maybe Baal's like going to the bathroom. Maybe you gotta yell a little louder. Like it's funny when you read the it's in I think it's in second first Kings maybe.
Okay.
And it's pretty wild. And then so they get through the whole thing, nothing happens. And then Elisha says, you know what? He has them bring like multiple barrels full of water. They douse the entire altar that Elisha's built, and
Hmm.
it's running over with water. And then Elijah prays to God, and fire from heaven. Whoa, sorry, I'm getting crazy. The
That's
fire from
right.
heaven comes, it licks up all the water. It's massive, and then the Israelites turn back to God and they kill all the priests of Baal. So I mean, Elisha, and then he would pray that it wouldn't
Wow.
rain, and they'd have multiple years of famine. And Ahab hated him, and Jezebel hated him, and it was just Elisha did some things. Like there's a story where Elisha's sitting up on a hill, and Ahab they've had a famine for 3 years. The king's looking for Elijah to kill him. Pissed, thinks it's Elijah's fault. So he sends one of the captains of his guard with 50 men to go capture Elijah. They
Okay.
come and they find him sitting on top of a hill, and they're like, "Are you Elijah?" And he said, "If I'm Elijah, a lightning bolt come down. It comes down and kills all of them." And they
Oh
did
my
that three
gosh.
times, and on the third time, the captain of the guard was like, "Listen, it's if you'll just come with us. This has nothing to do with us. I know that you have the power to kill us all because you've already killed 100 of us."
Wow.
So my point is Elijah was really powerful, and that's who John is compared to.
Wow.
And he's going to open the way for Jesus. And he does create that entire revival. You know what I mean? In Israel,
Hmm.
he's out in the Jordan and he's out in the wilderness, and people are coming out to see him, and the Pharisees are coming out to see him.
Right. Yeah, this like this description here, it's like the a preview of his resume. And I think because of Jesus's arrival, I think the impact of John is easily forgotten.
He might be overshadowed a little bit, yeah,
Right.
for
And
us.
for us. But this is really I'm just thinking, what do you shoot? And he couldn't tell her. He couldn't tell her any of this. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna
And
forget something.
this wasn't a virgin birth.
Right.
He had to go home and you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
give it to Elizabeth real good a
Get
couple
busy.
times.
He's like, I guess I better get busy.
He had to believe.
Right, right.
It's like it's time.
But he couldn't tell her that
Well,
John
I
was
think it says he
that this
didn't
was
it
going to
say he talked
happen.
about in sign language and
Yeah,
whatever.
with the people.
He probably did with his wife. I'm sure he communicated somehow.
Right.
You know what I mean? Remember Legends of the Fall? Anthony Hopkins
Yeah.
had that little chalkboard he wrote on after he
Oh,
had his
that's
stroke.
right. After a stroke. Oh, maybe Zechariah like drew stuff in the dirt.
Yeah, who
Maybe he drew
knows?
like the altar and an angel and drew her pregnant or something.
Well, I mean, he could have written too. I mean, he was a priest, so I'm sure he was
Oh,
educated.
yeah, that's true.
And
That's
I
true.
imagine that he could maybe, I don't know if women were as educated if they could read. I don't know what the literacy
Right.
was in that time. I'm
Hmm.
sure that priests could read. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
But
Here I'm picturing like, Pictionary in the dirt
yeah,
is what I'm
I don't
picturing.
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it certainly was a what was a
That's
thing.
wild.
And then yeah, he gives them the sign, and
Hmm.
then the congregation's been waiting on him. Like they're getting restless. Apparently this went on for a while. Like this whole
Hmm.
thing, whatever the interaction was, it took a while. It
Okay.
wasn't supposed to be in there that long. And they had I
He
don't
was
I
overwhelmed.
for those priests, they had when they would go into the holy area and offer the sacrifices and stuff behind the veil,
Hmm.
they had like bells on the bottom of their robes, and they
Okay.
tied a rope around one of their ankles because when the priest did something God didn't like, he killed him. Like right there. So there was priests, they'd hear the bells stop tinkling and they'd pull them out. Like
What?
it happened enough that they had measures in place, is my point.
Oh, you mean without going in there?
Well, right, because they can't go in it; they'll all die. Because
My
it's
gosh.
like God's presence,
I was going to say they believed that God was present in that room.
Well, yeah, and God had in the law made these
So interesting.
specific things, and if the priest screwed up, he'd kill him. I mean, this
My gosh.
it's kind of a, and it happened enough. They tied a rope around their feet every time they went in, or around one of their ankles. Because after a
This is
while, you just
crazy.
start pulling them in, reeling
I
them in.
guess. I feel like we glossed over that as well.
You didn't learn
Maybe,
that in the Catholic school, eh?
maybe I was going to say maybe they told us like, don't never go back there. Never sneak back where the tabernacle is. Don't go back there.
So they're getting kind of restless,
Okay.
and then I think it's kind of interesting that Elizabeth just kind of goes off by like herself for 5 months. You know what I mean?
Right?
To relish
Right.
her pregnancy.
And and we'll read next week, but I wonder if during that time is when she sees Mary.
It is.
Yeah,
I
during
think so.
a little bit of that time. But yeah,
Well,
5 months, that's a bit.
it's in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy that God sent the angel Gabriel to Mary. So it would have been after that that Mary meets up with Elizabeth.
Mm.
But it's interesting because that would be there would be a lot of awkward questions and interactions if you're a 75-year-old who suddenly comes up knocked up. You know what I mean?
Right?
Like people are like, what is going like there's a
Not as
lot.
awkward as a supposed virgin,
That's true.
those claims. But
Well,
I mean,
they would have a ready-made explanation in their mind for that. Ain't
sure.
nobody believing she's a virgin. You know what I
True.
mean?
True.
Joseph didn't even believe it at first till an angel appeared to him in a dream and told
Exactly.
him, "Listen, this is cool."
But in Elizabeth's case, maybe everyone was just like, Zechariah, woo, good job.
Well, I do know that once she finally, and it does talk about the birth of John. We'll get to that
Hmm.
later, but that it's not today, but we'll get to it in a couple weeks.
Hmm.
And that people, it was a big deal, like in the community, in the wider
Okay.
community, it was a
Because everyone,
big deal.
I mean, they probably said, like, this is a miracle
Yeah,
for this couple to be expecting. So,
I think that John, I don't know exactly, but because because of the vows, because Gabriel pronounced that he was going to be a Nazarite and some of those kinds of things,
hmm.
I have a feeling that as a community, in the wider community, that John from birth probably had more of a mark on him than Jesus for uh, for the community. Because you'll
Like, kind of
notice,
like a prestigious sort
well,
of,
my guess is that people expected something special out of him.
right. Like a
And
priest in the
so when he
making
starts
sort
his
of thing.
ministry and goes out to the Jordan and whatever, my guess is that people are like, yeah, remember how he was born, and remember how they were way too old, and mind you, the story of Sarah and Abraham, that's foundational for them. That's
Oh,
like
true.
George Washington for us
Right.
crossing the
Okay.
Delaware. You understand what I'm saying? This is like
Sure.
what their entire, and we're talking
Right.
about 2,000 years, their entire religion, their entire philosophy, everything, their nationality, their nation's
Yeah.
built on this
Their
story
their
about Abraham.
history and culture and all that is that's cool.
And so
So
I
they just
think
are
it was,
feeling like a repeat of this.
so they see that, and that in
Mhm.
the community is making an impression. I don't
Right.
think that was true with Jesus.
Right. Because I mean, God's hand was in it clearly, so they must have felt that here in their
Right.
case.
I think
Right. With
Jesus was more,
Jesus.
and you see that like when he goes back to his own,
Right.
but people are like, where'd this guy come from? You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Right.
And so, but I don't think that was true with John. I think John, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, because of the Nazarite vows and because he was a little different, and because they had, we talk about boxes and how God's, but they had a
Yeah.
box for John's miraculous kind of
Hmm.
birth. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because of Abraham and Sarah.
Hmm.
And so for that, I think kind of made some sense. My
Right.
guess would be, although we're not told this, my guess would be that there was a fair amount of people that thought that John might be the Messiah
I can imagine that.
for a while.
Sure.
So
I mean, especially since the angel made reference to Elijah. Um, and making the way, get he'll get the people ready for God. I mean, that's something, you can interpret that. We know that he was getting people ready for the Son of God,
Right.
but his
Well,
his
but he was
parents.
calling them, he was calling them to repentance. He was calling them to the
Hmm.
kingdom, to a
Hmm.
kingdom life. We saw
Hmm.
that, I think we saw that right at the beginning of Mark.
But
Because
I'm
that
just
was,
responding to you saying that you can understand how some people may have thought that John was the Messiah.
yeah. I mean, he's out
Yeah,
there baptizing people
right.
and then it almost for a while the Pharisees kind of concocted this almost rivalry between Jesus and John.
Hmm.
And they were counting who was baptizing the most. And you know what I mean? It got kind of crazy for a little bit there.
Right.
Um, so I just found the whole thing. I also found it interesting when it said he would soften the hearts of parents to their children. Because I don't know, I just think, I mean, that seems natural to me. You know what I mean? Like the way I am with my kids and
Hmm.
like nobody would have to soften my heart towards my kids. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, what is that?
I don't know exactly. Other than other than as a culture drifts from God,
Hmm.
there seems to be a weakening of the bond between parents and children. I mean, for example, I just saw this stat today,
Hmm.
Michigan. God forbid, Trump is walking all over everyone's reproductive rights, but in Michigan,
Yeah.
last year we had 31,000 more abortions than we've had in years past.
Oh,
But
31,000 more.
but my point in that is, and then, I've told you that I've been in Isaiah and like my personal kind of Bible reading and stuff that I do in the morning.
Hmm.
I've been walking through Isaiah. Well, I ran across I'm in Isaiah 57 right now, and I ran across something today that I didn't think I mean I thought about it at the time, but then when I saw this soften the hearts of parents towards their children, it brought me back to that.
Okay.
And what God's doing is he's talking about he's going off on this godless generation of Israelites. And what he says is, he says, um, do you have any idea what wretches you've turned out to be? A race of rebels, a generation of liars. You satisfy your lust any place you find some shade and fornicate at whim. You kill your children at any convenient spot. Any cave or crevice will do. And now that was true of Israel, and of course that was true of a lot of the pagan nations at the time. But one of the pagan gods was Moloch, and they would sacrifice babies on this like hot iron thing. And then so they wouldn't hear the screams of the babies, they'd have bands and drums all playing in the back, like the Germans did at the churches when the Jews
So
were going by, they'd
horrible.
just sing louder. You know what I mean?
Horrible. Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
but my point is that there seems to be in cultures that move away from God,
Hmm.
that seems to be a marker of it is parents now. I guess the farthest marker is parents killing their children, and that
Sure.
does seem to be a pretty strong marker. We have it in our own culture.
Absolutely. Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I
Right.
so I wondered when he said soften the hearts of parents towards their children,
Hmm.
if that's not a mark of a culture or of a people that's moving back to God.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
What do you think?
Maybe,
I don't know.
well, if that's the case, if they had turned away in that way at that time, maybe this, I'm going to call it a miracle, God's hand in bringing a child to this elderly couple and the community rallying around them and being excited about it, maybe that kind of reminded them of how special that event is,
Yeah.
having a child, kind of, you know, seeing a special child of some kind, a child that is, delivered by God. Like obviously this
Yeah.
was God's will happening right in front of them. Maybe that shifted their perspective.
And they're conquered by Rome at this point, and Roman culture was known for putting almost no value at all. I mean, kids just wasn't part of their deal. They had
Really?
kids and whatever, and
Uh-huh.
but but they didn't necessarily value
Okay.
children. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
Wow.
some cultures do. And so I think that's interesting because it does seem like as cultures turn from God that they don't value kids as much.
Did John speak in his ministry at all? Like in the Bible, do you recall him speaking at all on children? Like, we heard Jesus talk about children,
Yeah, Jesus was always that was a mark of Jesus is that
right?
he
Hmm.
took time with kids, right?
I wonder if John ever said anything.
I don't know. I honestly that's a good question that I don't know the answer
Hmm.
to.
Oh my
We'd have to
gosh, I feel
look
like
that.
you know all that
I
stuff.
don't know that one. I don't know. There aren't that many times where John. There aren't that many times in the Bible where we see John preaching, or at least
Okay.
where we get a text well, it talks about him preaching, but where we actually get him some quotes. You know what I mean?
Okay.
We get
Hmm.
a lot of it from Jesus, obviously, but but we don't get that much of it from John. So I just don't know. But we'll have to find that as we'll have to check
Yeah.
that as we go through because I don't know the answer. But
Hmm.
that's what I thought. When I saw that, it reminded me because it popped up on my phone or
Yeah.
something
That's
about Michigan
interesting.
having like and I knew we had
Oh,
in 2022, they overturned Roe v. Wade in what, 2020 or something? And in or it might have been 19, I don't know. But anyway, in 2022 in
oh,
Michigan, they had a proposal
I thought it
that
was
that
just like last year.
that basically um I mean, you can kill kids. Hell, you can kill 5-year-olds. We don't care. But
Wow.
it might not be that bad. But I mean,
Yeah, as long as they're still in
it's
the womb, right?
it's a Michigan's abortion laws are now as extreme as you can get. When Roe v. Wade
Hmm.
got overturned in
Hmm.
Michigan, you got more reproductive rights.
Right.
And
Yeah, I
that
know.
was voted on by the people. That wasn't like a legislature thing. And
I
it got
know.
like 60, you just had that in Florida, but it went down. But in
Right.
Michigan, it got like 66% of the vote.
Wow. It's crazy. They pushed
And
really hard for it. It's sad.
put a lot, well, it's a midterm. They put a lot of money behind it.
Hmm.
And Michigan's not as conservative as Florida. Certainly
Yeah.
not now.
Right.
And and even Florida, you had to fight it. I mean, you had to have Ron DeSantis like, get on a soapbox and really push for it in order to make sure that it didn't go through. So,
Yeah. Mm,
um, but I thought that was interesting. That just,
that is.
it struck me as something that we deal with in our culture, that they dealt with in their culture,
Hmm.
that's seems to be across the board in pagan kind of cultures. And that
Yeah.
changes as a culture turns toward God. And in the kingdom of God, I mean, we see that with Jesus. Bring the little children to me. The worst thing you can do is hurt one of these little ones. You'd be better off with a millstone tied around your neck, dropped in the ocean. Like
Right.
Jesus puts a high priority on children.
Hmm.
And then we see it in Luke. He puts a high priority on the birth and on like I mean we're going to see next week
Yeah.
how like Mary and Elizabeth are both pregnant and like John's leaping in her womb because Jesus, you know what I mean? Like this
Right.
idea that they're not humans is crazy. That's
Right.
just insane.
Yeah.
But the value of innocent life, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Vulnerable. That seemed the most vulnerable, I guess, would be kind of the unborn. And Jesus seems to put the most value on the most vulnerable. That seems to be kind of a mark of the kingdom. And we see that when Gabriel's even talking about it.
Hmm.
That Gabriel would mention that to me tells me that that's on God's heart. And one of the things that really grieves him is when he sees people, the parents killing their kids. I mean, my God,
I know.
like because essentially for us it's kind of sanitized and it's whatever and it's a procedure and it's this that, but and you're not putting them on some scalding iron thing, you know what I mean, some live baby, but it's still worship for a different God. It may be work, it could
Hmm.
be success, it could be whatever, that baby's going to be too inconvenient, you know
Hmm.
what I mean, and it does seem like that's a pillar, I think, of God's kingdom is
Hmm.
is not only a value of innocent babies and life and children,
Hmm.
but also pretty high value, pretty high priority on the relationship between parents and children. Like it's all through the epistles. Paul talks about it. Like
Yeah.
you can't be much of a Christian if you can't get your shit together and be a good parent. I feel
Right.
like, you know what I mean? You think that's
Yeah,
fair?
I think so. It's an interesting perspective. I'm glad that you pointed it out. I mean, to you and I, that's unthinkable. Like not
Yeah.
valuing, not valuing our children, discarding our children. Like we just doesn't even make sense to us.
No, but I can
But
understand how a 17-year-old gets pregnant and
sure.
I can absolutely I've often said that I think that
Yeah.
these young girls are as much a victim a lot of times as the babies are.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
you can understand how someone does that in their mind. But here you're talking about like culturally, when you're
Right.
talking about individuals, it's different.
Right.
But as a culture, when a
Cultural.
culture doesn't value it, it's like, oh, what is that? A
Right.
17-year-old not valuing it, that's just because they don't know
They're just
anything
scared to
yet.
death.
Yeah,
And they've
they
and
don't
they've
even get
had
it yet.
certain things pumped into them by the
Hmm.
culture and
Right.
it's an easy knee jerk. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? But right, when you have a culture, when you have an entire political party that
Hmm.
at the DNC National Convention has a mobile abortion van out. Remember that?
Right outside.
I mean, that was a
It
first,
was
and
a it
nobody had
was a
ever done that before.
it was a bad look.
You
I
know,
think it was a bad. I think it was. I think a lot of people thought that was a bad look.
but it's indicative of
Mm.
of a culture and of a cultural drift. You know what I mean? And I think they
Mm.
paid for it. I don't think they'll do it again. I
Exactly.
hope.
That's what I mean. I think it went too far.
Oh, it
And
did, 100%.
um so mm,
But the fact that it got to that point, I mean,
I know.
that they thought this is that important to at least half of the population to showcase it.
Right. I mean, the arrogance of it.
I mean, that's a long way from Bill Clinton saying that abortion should be um, legal, safe, and rare,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's a long way from that. I remember
Hmm.
talking about it at the time on news or whatever. But yeah,
Hmm.
it definitely signifies a culture going in a direction, and I think our culture is that it's just it's a marker. Maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Well, and if you're saying it's a marker of a culture moving away from God, I think that sort of behavior, like you described outside of the DNC, is um it's just so arrogant.
Yeah,
It's so defiant.
yeah,
It's looking at God and saying it. And
it
I know that,
is.
but I know that someone who's doing that, someone who believed in that display there, I
Yeah.
know that they'd laugh at that, which just kind of
But they'd laugh probably at God, at the very idea of God.
exactly.
And
So
so
it's
what
kind
you're
of like
saying
they're
is
so
I think
far
exactly
gone.
right.
Yeah, they're just so far gone that they don't value human life. They don't even value their own life. They don't even accept they don't acknowledge that the impact that's going to have on their own life. And they're certainly not placing any value on God
Yeah.
and God's love for them or for that child. So it's kind of all wrapped up together and oof.
I just thought it was interesting how important that
Yeah.
it's important enough that Gabriel
Right.
is putting that out to
Mm-hmm.
Zechariah in
Mm-hmm.
an announcement about this miraculous birth. Like that comes in turning the hearts of parents back towards their children.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And knowing history, knowing the not only Jewish history but a lot of pagan history, it makes sense that it's that Jesus said, "What are the two greatest commandments?" Or they asked him what the greatest commandment was, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
"Love Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind." And then he adds in the seconds like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you can't. The one depends on the other. We talked about that just a couple weeks ago, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like like loving others
Mm-hmm.
finds its roots and it depends on your love for God because
Right.
God is love. He's the source of love. And so the move farther you move away from him, the farther you move away from love for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Your neighbor, whoever. You just move away from it. And when God's getting rolling again after 400 years of silence and he's getting ready to send his son and he's getting ready for all this amazing stuff, one of the primary things on his mind is parents and children because that's core. That's at
Right.
least that's what I think. That's what it seems
Yeah.
like to me.
It's pretty interesting.
So I don't know, but
It's good.
What
I
do you
like
think?
thinking, well, I like thinking too. I just want to say one more thing. We hear Jesus in the Gospels. We've been reading Mark. We hear Jesus talking, and in a way, we're hearing from God
Yeah.
through his son.
Hmm.
However, Jesus is also a man.
Hmm.
And so it's not like sitting there just like a mouthpiece for God. He's not like
Right.
just a
It's
microphone
not like
in
Gabriel.
right.
It's a little
I'm just
different.
it's just kind of hit me that I don't know, I almost got like kind of goosebumpy thinking we're like hearing a message sent directly from God. Like it's this like God saying, Hey
Yeah, like
Gabriel,
Gabriel was in heaven's throne room and now he's
yes,
down here.
go tell them this. And
Right.
I don't know, it's just kind of cool to think about that.
Especially coming up on December 3rd. Who knows what's going to happen?
I know, right? Tell you what, we have aliens. If we have aliens standing on our front doorstep saying, "Don't be afraid," hold your fire. That's pretty crazy.
I know.
I
Well,
hope
I think
we're,
we did pretty
yeah,
good, right?
yeah, this is great.
I enjoyed it. I'm excited for the Christmas story.
I am too. It's a very good idea to deviate from our path briefly. Take a little detour,
Yeah.
a little December detour.
Anything else, or do we get it all, you think?
I
Good
don't know.
enough?
I always think of something afterwards,
Well,
but
yeah,
it's
that's
okay.
always going to be the case. At some point, we got to just shut it off, right?
Right.
We
We
did
have
the
to
best.
shut off. We have
We
to
did the
shut
best
off the
we could
wildly
do.
talented.
Just
Oh,
turn the mics off and
sorry to
leave it
our
all on the floor.
million listeners. No, seriously, people who listen say like, "Oh, I wish like they want to like they want to talk to us."
I know.
Can people leave comments anywhere? They can on Substack, right?
They can on Substack. I think they can on Spotify, although I haven't seen, I don't think hardly nobody thinks of leaving comments on Spotify.
Yeah, I guess
I
so.
mean, I don't. I'm not any different. Socials you could, you know what I mean? Like
Oh, true.
Twitter or
So are you going to put this in its entirety on X?
yeah, I'll put it on X.
Cool.
Yeah, and people can respond on X. So that is
Nice.
something I should tell people that we're doing that now on both YouTube and X. I'm putting the full videos of the show so you can see how beautiful Carrie is.
I know no more pajamas.
And you can see me like blowing my nose and trying to keep my shit together because I'm
Oh, I
coming
know
off a cold.
he's still sick. You're doing a lot better today, though. You seem a lot better.
So find us there. You can find us. It's either Todd's World or Todd's World 2023, depending on where you're at and what you're looking at.
Hmm.
And you can find us on Substack. I really like Substack. I'm
I do
planning on
too.
getting more involved in Substack, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that.
I feel like it's growing too. Like I feel
Yeah, I
like it's
like it.
something that is I mean I'm sure it's huge already, but I feel like it's not as established as the other ones. So
No, I agree with you.
feels kind of new, which is fun.
So yeah, find us wherever there. I don't know. We're probably on Instagram too, and I don't know, wherever. So you could
Wherever, all
you
the
could find us.
places,
Yeah, all the socials. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today, Carrie. Thanks for joining me today. It's a good
Happy
time.
December. Thanks,
Yeah.
Todd.
Happy December 2nd. I think that
Woohoo.
December 3rd is going down in
Maybe,
history.
maybe the last day of the world.
Might be the last part of Here's What
We're
Jesus.
laughing about it, but it's like, what if it is?
It's like Y2K.
Say your
Do
prayers.
I have
Yeah,
enough
really.
bottles of water?
Back up your
You
photos and I know, get some water, toilet paper, canned goods.
remember that? People were so crazy about that.
Yeah, the Y2K.
I never believed a word of the Y2K thing.
Well, I just
I'm
thought
more apt to believe the UFO thing than I am the Y2K thing.
I didn't think that the world was going to end, but I really did think it was going to kind of blow up a bunch of our technology because of the date formatting. But
And it did nothing.
it was, I mean, my mom worked for the bank at that time, so they had a lot of work to do to prepare for it. But
But it was all fine.
like the grid didn't shut down.
Nothing
We
happened at
figured it
all.
out. Can you imagine the day someone looked forward and thought, "Oh crap.
It's like
What are we going to do when it's not 1990 something?"
it's like these people who C.S. Lewis talks about in the World's
Mhm.
Last Night we talked about with the secret rapture stuff, who like
Right.
all go out to a certain hillside and then after a while they go home to a late breakfast to the jeers of a drunkard. That's what he says. It's like, well, that didn't work out.
That's gonna be
So I
all of
should have
us.
paid my credit card bill after all.
Oh my
All
gosh, that's funny. All
right,
right.
guys. Thanks for joining us today. We will catch you next week. Hopefully, maybe we'll see what happens. If we don't, you'll know why. Everybody will know.
Everyone will know. Our intention is to be here.
All right. We'll see you later, guys. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.